I woke up in a panic, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the alarm clock reading 3:15 a.m. The feeling of being watched lingered, an oppressive weight pressing down on me. I shook it off as another bout of insomnia-induced paranoia, a regular occurrence since I moved into this creaky old house. I dragged myself out of bed, craving a glass of water to calm my nerves. As I stepped into the hallway, the wooden floorboards groaned underfoot, their echoing protests a familiar, yet unsettling, sound. The shadows cast by the moonlight filtering through the curtains seemed to dance and shift with every step I took. I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the light and my sleep-deprived mind. The kitchen was at the far end of the hallway, and as I reached it, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and that sensation of being watched grew stronger. I flicked on the light, and the brightness momentarily blinded me. When my vision cleared, everything seemed normal. The kitchen was as I'd left it, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator. I filled a glass with water and drank it slowly, trying to steady my nerves. As I set the glass down, I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement. I turned sharply, but nothing was there. My reflection in the window stared back at me, wide-eyed and pale. I laughed nervously at my own jumpiness. Convincing myself I was just tired, turning off the light, I started back down the hallway. The darkness seemed thicker now, more oppressive. My steps faltered as I noticed a figure standing at the end of the hall, barely illuminated by the moonlight. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze. The figure was tall and thin, almost skeletal, with eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dark. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond or move. It just stood there, watching me. I fumbled for the light switch, and when the hallway lit up, the figure was gone. My heart pounded harder. I was sure I'd seen someone. But the hallway was empty. I rushed back to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I told myself it was a trick of the shadows, my tired mind playing games. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I climbed back into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin like a child hiding from monsters. Sleep was elusive, and I lay there, eyes darting around the room, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The next day, I was a wreck. Dark circles ringed my eyes, and every little noise made me jump. I tried to go about my day as usual, but the memory of that figure haunted me. I couldn't focus, and every shadow seemed to hold a lurking menace. I decided to do some research on the house, hoping to find a rational explanation for what I'd seen. The local library was a treasure trove of old newspapers and historical records. I dug through them, uncovering a dark history I hadn't been aware of when I bought the place. The house had belonged to a reclusive man named Edgar Blackwood, who had mysteriously disappeared decades ago. Rumors swirled about his fate, some saying he'd gone mad, others whispering about dark rituals and malevolent spirits. One article caught my eye. It described strange occurrences in the house after Blackwood's disappearance, reports of shadowy figures, cold spots, and inexplicable noises. Previous owners had either moved away quickly or were found dead under mysterious circumstances. My skin prickled as I read, the pieces of a terrifying puzzle falling into place. That night, I prepared myself for whatever might come. I armed myself with a flashlight and kept my phone within reach, ready to call for help if needed. As the hours ticked by, I fought to stay awake, my body screaming for rest. But the fear of what might come kept me alert. At precisely 3:15 a.m., the air grew colder, and a heavy silence fell over the house. I strained my ears, listening for any sign of movement. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but the familiar shapes of my room. I almost convinced myself that I'd imagined the whole thing, that my tired mind had conjured up ghosts from the past. Then, I heard a soft, almost imperceptible, whispering. It was coming from the hallway. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and stepped out of bed, flashlight in hand. The whispering grew louder as I approached the hallway, a chorus of voices just beyond comprehension. The beam of light wavered as my hand shook, the shadows seeming to twist and writhe in response. At the end of the hall, the figure stood once more. This time, it was closer, the details more distinct. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I took a step back, heart racing, but the figure advanced, gliding silently over the floorboards. I turned to run, but the shadows closed in around me, cold tendrils wrapping around my limbs, pulling me back. The whispering voices grew louder, filling my head with a cacophony of sounds. Panic surged through me, and I struggled against the unseen force holding me. Blackwood must have attempted this ritual, Dr. Harris said, her voice low, but something went wrong. Instead of gaining immortality, he became bound to the shadows, his spirit twisted and malevolent. But why did it come after me? I asked, dread creeping into my voice. The entity might still be searching for a host, someone to complete the ritual and fulfill its bargain. By living in Blackwood's house, you unintentionally became part of the curse. A sense of hopelessness washed over me. So, what do we do now? We need to perform a counter-ritual, Dr. Harris said firmly. We must find the artifacts mentioned in Thorncroft's journal and use them to sever the connection between Blackwood and the entity. Only then can we hope to banish it for good. The search for the artifacts led us on a wild chase through antique shops, occult stores, and even online auctions. Each piece was carefully procured and verified against Thorncroft's descriptions. Finally, after weeks of relentless pursuit, we had everything we needed: a silver dagger, a vial of blessed water, a black mirror, and a tome of ancient spells. The final step was to return to Blackwood House. The thought of going back filled me with dread, but I knew it was the only way to end this nightmare. Dr. Harris and I arrived at the house at dusk, the setting sun casting long shadows that seemed to beckon us inside. We sat up in the living room, arranging the artifacts in a precise circle as described in the journal. Dr. Harris began the incantation, her voice steady and commanding. The air grew cold, and the shadows deepened, but this time I was prepared. I stood beside her, holding the black mirror and the silver dagger, ready to do whatever it took to end this curse. As the ritual progressed, the shadows writhed and twisted, forming the dark figure once more. Its glowing eyes locked onto mine, filled with rage and desperation. Dr. Harris continued chanting, her voice rising above the cacophony of whispers that filled the room. With a final, triumphant shout, she thrust the dagger into the center of the circle. The figure screamed, a sound that pierced my very soul, and then silence. The shadows receded, and the oppressive weight lifted. It's done, Dr. Harris said, her voice filled with exhaustion. The connection is severed. I sank to the floor, tears of relief streaming down my face. The nightmare was finally over. Blackwood's curse had been lifted, and the shadows no longer held any power over me. The shadows may have retreated, but their memory lingered. As the weeks turned into months, the normalcy I craved slowly returned. My sleep improved, and the haunted look in my eyes began to fade. Yet, despite my best efforts to move on, I couldn't escape the lingering sense that something was watching me. I threw myself into work, hoping to rebuild the life I had before the shadows claimed my peace. My colleagues welcomed me back, though they tiptoed around me with caution, as if afraid to stir the darkness they sensed within me. I couldn't blame them. I had become a ghost, drifting through the motions of a life that no longer felt entirely my own. One evening, while sorting through some old files, I came across a folder labeled Blackwood House. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing photographs and notes I had taken during my brief time there. Images of the house's dark, foreboding rooms stared back at me, bringing with them a rush of memories I tried to suppress. Among the documents, I found a letter, yellowed with age and written in a spidery script. It was addressed to Edgar Blackwood and dated several months before his disappearance. The letter was from someone named Elias Thorncroft, a name that sparked a vague memory from my research in the library. Elias had been a close associate of Blackwood, rumored to be involved in the same dark practices. The letter spoke of an upcoming ritual, one that promised great power but warned of dire consequences if not performed correctly. Thorncroft urged caution, stressing the importance of precise timing and the use of specific artifacts. As I read the letter, a chill crept over me. The language was cryptic, filled with references to ancient texts and entities best left unnamed. I couldn't shake the feeling that this letter held a clue to the darkness that had plagued Blackwood House and now, it seemed, my own life. I decided to visit Dr. Harris again, hoping she could shed some light on the mystery. The drive to her office felt longer this time, each mile filled with a sense of impending doom. Dr. Harris greeted me warmly but with a hint of concern in her eyes. You look troubled, Mr. Collins. What brings you back? I handed her the letter, watching as her expression shifted from curiosity to grave concern. This was among Blackwood's belongings, I explained. I think it might have something to do with what happened in that house and what's still happening. She read the letter carefully, her brow furrowing. Elias Thorncroft, she muttered. He was known to dabble in dark rituals, often with disastrous results. This letter, it hints at something far more sinister than what we faced before. What do you mean? I asked, my anxiety mounting. Blackwood might have succeeded in his ritual, but at a terrible cost. If Thorncroft's warnings were ignored, it's possible Blackwood unleashed something beyond his control. That entity you encountered that might be part of a larger, more dangerous force. My blood ran cold. Is it still out there? Even after we banished it from the house, Dr. Harris sighed, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and determination. If the entity was only a fragment of what Blackwood summoned, it's possible there are other manifestations. We need to find out more about this ritual and how to undo whatever Blackwood and Thorncroft set in motion. We decided to revisit the library, hoping to uncover more information about Thorncroft and his connection to Blackwood. The library's musty smell and dim lighting did little to calm my nerves, but Dr. Harris's presence was reassuring. We combed through old records, newspapers, and journals, piecing together the puzzle of Blackwood and Thorncroft's dark partnership. Hours passed, and just as we were about to call it a night, Dr. Harris found an old journal hidden behind a row of dusty books. It was Thorncroft's personal journal, filled with detailed accounts of his rituals and experiments. As we read, a clearer picture began to emerge. Thorncroft and Blackwood had been obsessed with immortality, willing to go to any lengths to achieve it. The final entry in the journal detailed the ritual mentioned in the letter. Thorncroft described it as a last-ditch effort to secure their immortality, warning that failure would result in a fate worse than death. The ritual involved summoning a powerful entity, one that could grant eternal life but demanded a heavy price in return.